The Pittsburgh Steelers lost to the Cleveland Browns on Thursday night, 29-17. We're going to go over all the things that went wrong, what started to go right for the offense, and then went terribly wrong later in the game. Lots of questions. The run defense, is this team actually going to find a way to fight their way out of it? Pittsburgh, we may be in the bad place. But we're going to break it all down here, help you guys get through your Friday. I'm Chris Carter, the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, please hit the like button in this video if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, guys, we got to get to this. This was a bad loss. This was like you can see, at least with the Patriots, you can say, hey, you know what? The bobble punt and the dropped interception and absolutely getting mossed by Nelson Aguilar. You can say if one of those three things don't happen, nah, bro, this was not like that. This was bad. Now let's break this down in a lot of different ways. I want to lead with the quarterback situation because that's the most prevalent. That's the thing that can change the most. Mike Tomlin said after this game, no, definitely no. There's no change coming at quarterback. I said last week, or well, all this week, even it's still Friday. I'm still operating like this is a Sunday game. I said this week, like if it was me, if it was my call, this would have been the last straw. But the Steelers, they take their time with everything. They're not a knee-jerk reaction team. They're going to let a guy try to fight out of a situation. Truly, though, I think we've seen enough to see this experiment with Mitch Trubisky. I mean, they're getting better. Like this game, 20 of 32 for 207 yards. I mean, sure, and he had that rushing touchdown. And there were glimpses. There were glimpses where it was like, hey, there's something there. He took a couple more shots in this game. But I'm telling y'all, this ain't about Matt Canada at this point, man. Like, the play calls are there. Even the George Pickens catch, which was a spectacular catch and just shows you how much he is needed. And I know people are saying, well, why'd you only throw it to him they threw it to him 7 times. That's a good amount of times. But why does he only have 3 catches? I'm looking at the play. I'm looking at that play, and I'm thinking, oh, it's 14-13 at the half. The Steelers have a lead. They've got a shot at this. And they show that play from behind Mitch Trubisky, Amazon's broadcast. And they show you so you can see his vision. With no defender right in front of him. So he's not, there's no Myles Garrett screaming in his face that he has to make a tough decision here. He throws that pass to George Pickens and it worked out. It was a great play. But they show Chase Claypool basically doing jumping jacks 20 to 30 yards downfield with nobody around him. And I mean, not a safety, not a linebacker, not a corner. Nobody was even looking at him. It could have been lobbed to Chase Claypool, and he got 20 more yards after the catch and how bad it was. So even on what might have been the biggest play of the game from Mitch Trubisky, he still is missing the open wide receivers. And again, they're in the middle part of the field. I keep saying it. I keep watching the All 22. I am sad that because of our rules here on the Locked On Podcast Network that I can't show you just film on this channel because then I would just point to it. But if I was to draw it right here, like in the air, say this is Trubisky, this is Claypool. He had this amount of, well, see, this is how bad I am doing mirrors. He had this amount of space. Like he had that much space around him. I suck at mirroring and trying to point at things on a screen apparently, but you get my point. He just had so much space around him. And it wasn't just that play. There's so many other plays. Dude, in the half, they're running the 2-minute drill. Deontay Johnson, wide open. Mitch Trubisky just throws it, it's through the sideline. And Deontay's just looking like, come on, man. We're trying to help you out. We're getting wide open. We're doing what we got to do. I don't think that this is a coordination problem. I don't think this is a play calling problem. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that try to cap for the quarterback because whatever reason you think Mitch is the guy, or you don't like blaming the players and you just like blaming coaches. But when I blame a coach is when there's just consistently nobody open. when there's guys that are just covered all the time and there's no opportunities to make those big plays. But I'm telling you, the more and more I watch the All-22 of the Patriots game, the Bengals game, and we haven't even seen the All-22 for this game just yet, and I'm sitting here saying they're still wide open and he's not getting it to him. Even though he did better, this was probably the best performance he's had of the three. I know that Mike Tomlin doesn't want to be a knee-jerk reaction guy. I know that the Pittsburgh Steelers are all about, playing the long game, not freaking out, being in the moment, all that kind of stuff. But I think that they are wasting time on who could be a better quarterback now. Now, I will say this about Kenny Pickett. This would be a long week for him to get ready for the New York Jets, and that would be positive. But after that, you're going to have like the Bills, the Bucks, the Dolphins, and the Eagles. That is going to be a gauntlet. And maybe what the Steelers are doing is preparing for him to be ready after that set of games is over. The problem is that the season might be over by then. And maybe because that's the bye week, then TJ Watt can come back. Maybe you start Kenny Pickett, and maybe that's when you start your run. Maybe that's when you start to be the competitive version of the Steelers that you anticipated for this year. But man, I ain't seeing it from Mitch. And again, I'm not like a friends with Matt Canada or anything. I call it as I see it. And I don't think that the play calls are the problem right now. There's times when they are the problem. But the biggest problem with this offense is that you got to have a quarterback who sees the field and takes what's there. Not to, like Ben Roethlisberger. There were days he took what's there, and there was days he forced something and made it happen. And that's part of what made him a great quarterback, was that even when it wasn't there, he made it be there. He would make a throw into an impossible situation. They're not asking Mitch Trubisky to do that. They're asking for 50-50 balls in one-on-one situations, and when there's a receiver wide open, just get it to him. And be like decent at that. Like, it's impossible to make the right decision every time. But when you scheme something to be wide open, you got to get it there. And he's just not doing that. And this wasn't the only problem this game, because the offense put up points early. The defense was lackluster. But I do think that there's a very obvious reason for why they are lackluster. And I think it was very obvious, especially as this game continued. Because this defense, it wasn't just about TJ Watt. This defense looked a lot different than it did from the first half against the Patriots and from the entire game against the Bengals. And again, it's not just about TJ Watt. There's definitely a factor there that played into it. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Najee. We'll talk about the receivers, because there's stuff to talk about there. There's a lot of things to go over. We'll do all of that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about Brightco. Now, if you don't know about Brightco is the ultimate jewelry insurance company that's going to help you make sure that if you ever lose an important piece of jewelry, you'll have a replacement, something that gets you back the value for something that you lose. So if you're thinking of an engagement ring, an expensive watch, any jewelry, whether it's lost, stolen, or you just can't figure out what happened to it, Brightco is here to help you out with this insurance policy. If you've ever been on a YouTube dive and you've seen like a guy about to propose to his fiance, to make a woman his fiance, and you see the video and then he drops the ring and it goes in the sewer or falls out of a helicopter or something like that, or something which is ridiculous and stupid, then there you realize, man, you're out of thousands of dollars and you're being humiliated on the internet for having that stupid video. But Brightco's here to help you, not with the internet part, can't help with looking stupid, but they can get back your hard-earned cash and money with their insurance policies to back up that expensive engagement ring. So go to bright.co/locked on to see some of these insane videos I'm talking about, but also you can learn about how you can get cheap, easy insurance for just for as low as $5 on expensive jewelry. Again, that's bright.co/locked on to make sure that you're getting your expensive jewelry insured. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing to break down the Steelers' 29-17 loss to the Browns here. The Steelers now fall to 1-2. They are officially third in the division, and they'll most likely be third in the division after this week, unless Baltimore loses, and then maybe they're second, I guess. But point being, this was an opportunity that was missed. But I want to talk about this defense, because we saw some lapses in this game. And lapses that I hadn't seen yet from this team. Before we get to the run defense, they went right after Terrell Edmonds twice in the red zone early on. Those 2 touchdowns, I think, were very pivotal because if the Browns don't get those 2 touchdowns, it's a completely different game. And both times they worked their way to the red zone, and you saw a breakdown that hadn't happened in those first 2 games. And Terrell Edmonds, in a situation, backed off of Amari Cooper and just gave him the inside leverage, and there was nothing anyone else can do. And he, as soon as the play was over, he looked over. He was like, wait, someone else was supposed to be there. There was a communication breakdown. One thing we had talked about, even with the touchdown given up to Nelson Aguilar last week, with Joe Burrow, with the Patriots, there was not the communication was there. That the secondary was in their positions. All the throws that were being made by Burrow and Mac Jones were just really good throws and really good reads into the heat of contested coverage or just design plays that were well put together. Those 2 red zone touchdowns were not that. And that tells me there was a bit of mental fatigue on those guys' part. And you're probably sitting here saying, well, wait a minute, Chris, well, how could there be mental fatigue, early part in the game? I think what we saw across the board with the defense was, you got to remember this team has been on the field. This defense, not this team, excuse me. This defense has been on the field more than any other team in the NFL. If you go and you look at defensive snap counts on Pro Football Focus, and this was before tonight, so I'm not even including tonight in these calculations. The Steelers have the top 4 players in snap counts. Top 4 players in snap counts on defense. And they have several other players coming up the list as well, the guys who sub in and out. Myles Jack is up in that list. There's other guys that fit in there. Alex Highsmith is up in that list. I look at that and I see, man, we saw how long of a game that Bengals game was and how much the defense had to be on the field for that game. Long games are one thing, but long games where your offense just keeps putting you back out there and putting you back out there, that wears down on you. We've seen that wear down on this team. We've seen that wear down on any team. And I think even more so for the Steelers because they had a long day against the Bengals, and then they had another long day where the offense wasn't giving them much time to rest against the Patriots. They had another long game, and then you had to come back on a Thursday. And this is no excuse, but even Cam Heyward at times looked gassed, tired, just trying to figure things out. And again, it's no excuse. You got to gear up. And this is part of it, was that they needed to find ways to win this game, and they just couldn't. The Browns beat them straight up. But I do think that there's hope for this defense to say, hey, you know what? Like Myles Jack, I thought in the first game was phenomenal. He was where he needed to be. He was in the hole making tackles. But in this game, I mean, you saw missed tackle after missed tackle. You saw guys making mistakes that were uncharacteristic. Even Cam Heyward sometimes getting blown out of his spot in a way that you didn't expect. I think these guys were physically gassed, and I think there's at least hope there to say, okay, you know what? If that's what it was, maybe after this long week off, after the Thursday Night Football game, you could come in and play better against the Jets team that has some talented running backs like Michael Carter. But they got to do something, and they got to get the pass rush going. There were times it did get going. Alex Highsmith did have a sack and a half in this game. Larry Ogunjobi had half a sack in this game, but you need more. And I think, for one, we are seeing that definitely TJ Watt might be the most valuable player on the defensive side of the ball, and maybe even all of football, with how much this defense has turned from an elite turnover making machine to, decent that can keep you in the game. But I mean, you saw this game as it wore on. There were sometimes the one defensive player, I'll say Cam did have a good game. Like, he didn't have a bad game, but there were times he looked gassed. The one defensive player I thought who really stepped up and made some plays in some big times to keep the defense alive was Devin Bush. There were some times when Kareem Hunt met him in the hole. It was one-on-one, and he was putting him down. I'm telling y'all, Devin Bush is a lot better of a player than people are giving him credit for. But the Browns had a smart plan of attack. They kept grinding the run. I thought early on in their first drive of the game, Nick Chubb ripped off like a 10-yard run, and then they threw 3 passes in a row. And I'm like, well, if that's the game plan for the rest of the night, the Steelers got a good shot because they just went away from their strength there. But too many times the defensive line, I think the edges, Malik Reed holding down his spot a little bit, but not able to turn back the run inside those stretch plays where Nick Chubb is just so good at. those definitely wore down on the Steelers. And it allowed Jacoby Brissett, who I thought played a really good game. He outplayed Mitch Trubisky, 21 of 31, 220 passing yards with 2 touchdowns. But none of those had to come at the expense of targeting Minkah Fitzpatrick like Mac Jones and Joe Burrow did in the last 2 games. And that's why Minkah Fitzpatrick finished this game with 4 tackles. And I don't track that. I have to go back. We have to wait to see PFF's numbers on tracking who was targeted, what, and where. But I'm not sure if Minkah Fitzpatrick was targeted a single time in this game. So for the defense, I think there's hope that they can get better. I also think we saw Ahkello Witherspoon, and that didn't even look like gas. That just looked like he was out of his element trying to keep up with Amari Cooper. I think Witherspoon is a fine, hold the bar type of cornerback, but a CB1, he's not looking like it. Jamar Chase got his yards against him. Nelson Aguilar mossed him. This game, Amari Cooper was eating him up. I think that we're seeing that, hey, it's fine to have him out there right now because you couldn't get another. Joe Hayden, I guess they deemed he was too old. He retired this week. But you need a number 1 cornerback, which is why I said that a lot in the offseason. I thought they should go get one, whether it was in the draft or in free agency. Go get a guy that could take away a star receiver, and then it makes it easier for Levi Wallace, for Cam Sutton, for Minkah Fitzpatrick, for Terrell Edmonds, knowing that that they have a guy who's battling with that superstar wide receiver and not getting beat most of the times. I think Witherspoon kind of showed at least through these first 3 games, he's not that. I think he's a fine fighter and a fine competent cornerback. He's just not a CB1. It's what I said all along. I think there's a lot of CB2s on this roster. I think Sutton, Witherspoon, and Wallace, you'd be happy to line them up against the team's number 2 receiver, T. Higgins. Like if you're going up against the Bengals, you'd be going up at T. Higgins, but not Jamar Chase. But again, I'm not too mad at the secondary in this game, even though the 2 touchdowns given up by Terrell Edmonds were pretty bad. And those were communication breakdowns. Like Ahkello Witherspoon to get eat at. I think the biggest thing was the run game. My biggest key for this team was take away the run, and then Jacoby Brissett would have had to take those shots downfield, but he didn't have to. Nick Chubb, 23 carries, 113 yards, and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt, 12 carries, 47 yards. And in key situations, they were just converting and converting and converting. I mean, I will say this: the defense won on 3rd down a lot. They forced the Browns to go 6 of 16. That's 38%. You're happy with that any day of the week. What you're not happy with, though, 3 of 4 on 4th downs for 75%. So so what? 3 of those, you got what? 10 stops on 3rd down in this game, and 3 of those you allowed to convert for more yards to extend the sticks on 4th down. You're also allowed 3 or 4 in the red zone. That's not a good look. But again, I will say I think that a lot of this came from tiredom. The thing is that when I look at those 3rd down numbers, you think that was good for the Steelers defense. The Steelers offense was 11% on 3rd downs, 1 of 9. According to our friend Brooke Pryor from ESPN and their stats department, that is the worst 3rd down percentage in a single game in Mike Tomlin's tenure under the Pittsburgh Steelers. And again, I'm telling you, it's not because they're dialing up the wrong plays. It's not because, that nobody's getting open. Guys are getting open. Guys are in their spots. Mitch is either not seeing them at times or he's just missing them at times. Either way, I think it's proven costly. I do think there were positives on offense, certainly. I liked what I heard from Pat Freiermuth after the game, talking about how they're getting closer. That's fine. But that's what you're supposed to say. But I think that's another good sign. Like there are good teammates on this roster. There are good players who are trying their best, and they're obviously frustrated. But they're being patient. They're making sure that they're not lashing out and giving the media things to latch on and say, aha, they're mad at each other. They're trying to focus and figure things out internally. And that's not easy when Mitch Trubisky isn't playing well. That's not easy when you're trying to establish an identity on offense and you still don't know who you are. You still don't know what your base is, what your strength is, what your foundation comes from. but maybe we saw some glimpses of what it could be in this game, because there were times I thought that there were some really good things that we saw, that flashes where it's like, hey, when Mitch Trubisky sees it and does these things, it makes it a lot easier on everybody else. And again, I'm not talking about super complex read. I'm talking about a simple, just look at the middle part of the field and take what's there. And if it's not there, you have another option. And I do think Matt Canada is giving that to him. We're going to circle back to the offense in just a bit here, because I talked a lot about the defense there, but I want to talk about some of the good the offense did to get the points that it did. They doubled their touchdown total for the entire season by getting 2 in this game. Not that that's great, but, I guess that's progress. If you're listening on an audio platform, I just did big quotation marks with my fingers. But we'll get to that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about betonline.net. BetOnline, BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NFL season that's now in week 3. All the big games coming up, all the sports developments and league reviews and news, all right there on betonline.net. Also, at the NBA around the corner, you can put money down on that. You also have Major League Baseball. They're inching forward towards the playoff season. There's a lot of stuff to put money down right at BetOnline. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, and for live betting, playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're wrapping up our thoughts here on this loss. And again, this is before I've done a full film study. I was just watching from home. I did not go to Cleveland. Pitt plays Saturday. I have to cover that. Plus, I wanted to do this show, and I got a show I got to do for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And we got Friday Night Lights football. You get my point. I am a busy person. So point being, there's a lot to break down from this loss and things that went wrong, but there were things that were going right on offense. We talked a lot about how this offensive line was going to be the bane of this offense. They were going to be the things that holds them back, that kills them. They have been very good. And I remember seeing after that Jaguars preseason game, and you know who you are if you're out there. I'm not saying just my listeners. I'm saying people on Twitter, people on, all the Steelers fans are like, fire Pat Meyer. Get Mike Munchak. He's terrible. Get him out of here. And I'm like, can we let him get through a whole season before we come for his job? But then we see in these first 3 games, the offensive line actually holding up. The offensive line actually creating a pocket. And if you're still on the drum that, the quarterback never has time, you are wrong. Mitch has time. There were even times that the Browns were sending all-out blitzes, and not just the offensive line, but the tight ends and the running backs were picking it up. There was a play. Najee Harris, he flipped a guy with a pickup block that he had. Jaylen Warren had another great pickup blitz block. The pass protection is there. I'll also say the run blocking ain't as bad now. Najee Harris, 15 carries for 56 yards and a touchdown. Also a grown man touchdown where he just threw Josh Johnson off of him as he was grabbing onto his face mask. But what happened with the run game? When it came to the second half and the Steelers tried to execute their offense, the Browns stacked the box and said, you're going to have to beat us with Mitch Trubisky's arm. Mitch Trubisky missed on some plays, and it was 3 and out. And those 3 and outs, to me, were what killed this Steelers team, because if you go back and you look, yes, there was the 2 touchdowns early in the game, towards the end of the first quarter, the start of the second. But in that third quarter, the Steelers start with the ball. They do get a 10-play drive, but they end up punting because of a penalty on an illegal man downfield. But then the next 3 drive, 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. And when they have those 3 and outs happen, the Browns had a whole drive where the Steelers held them to a field goal in the third quarter. But the next one was the touchdown drive, and that was the backbreaker. And that was a 14-play drive and an 11-play drive. And to the Steelers' defensive credit, They forced 3 punts after that on the Browns to finish up the game. But this defense will continue to be tired. They will continue to not be able to be the aggressive version of themselves that gets them the wins that they want to play. Like the style of defense they want to play is going after the quarterback, forcing you to be desperate and making the play themselves. And it's really hard to play that kind of aggressive type of football when you're going back up on the field within less than 2 minutes. Which, if I'm looking at this clock right now, the first 3 and out took about a minute and a half off the clock. The second 3 and out took about 40 seconds off the clock. The third 3 and out took about 40 seconds off the clock. So you're talking about across the board in 3 possessions. Doing my maths real quick in my head. At best, you're talking 5 minutes in 3 possessions. At best, I would say it's actually more like 4 minutes there. But you can't live like that. Again, even if you just move the sticks a little bit to buy the defense some time, and there lies your problem. And again, the plays are there, but the Browns realized at halftime, hey, force Mitch Trubisky to beat us. Force him to see the field. Because even on these plays that he's succeeding on, he's not seeing the field. He's sticking to his first and second reads, or even just his first read. I keep looking at this. I keep looking at the strengths of this team. There's still playmakers out there. Chase Claypool, I thought, made some plays when he was put in some tough spots. He came down 3 catches for 35 yards. There was one that it was actually more of a good breakup. There was one pass that I thought he could have hauled it. It would have been amazing. You saw the catching ability of George Pickens. Deontay Johnson did have a drop or two, but still 8 of 11 on catches and targets for 84 yards. Pat Freiermuth not used nearly enough. And again, I don't think it's a play calling problem because he's out there and he's open. He's just not getting the football. So how do you fix this? How do you move forward with this? Y'all know Chris's answer, put in Kenny Pickett. But again, you want to protect him from this gauntlet of teams coming up. Okay. And this long week, whatever communication, whatever talks need to happen, whatever practice needs to happen, extra stuff, whatever you need to do, you got to get it done with Mitch Trubisky. Because if you don't come out and you at least put together a composed game plan, this will be the first year that Mike Tomlin has a losing season in the NFL. Because, Tony Serena and I talked about this on our Tuesday episode, or was it Wednesday? Our Wednesday episode, excuse me. If they don't find a way to steal some wins without TJ Watt before that gauntlet happens, it's going to be rough. And right now they're 1-2 and they play the Jets. And after the Jets, it's gauntlet time. Now, again, maybe they beat the Jets next week because they have a longer week off and they'll be able to kind of recoup, and maybe the defense will be a little more fired up and maybe the offense will be a little more coordinated. Who knows? But right now, this isn't cutting it. And again, the Patriots game, there are 3 individual mistakes away from maybe winning that game. This game, there was a lot of things that they're away from winning this game. I'll also address something that I saw. I was going back and forth with one of my guys, Will Graves from the Associated Press. And Will's a good man. He covers all sorts of sports, knows his stuff. But we had an argument about the decision that from Mike Tomlin on 4th and 1, less than 2 minutes. In the Browns side of the field, the Steelers are down 9, and they elect to kick a field goal from 4th and 1. And with the 4th and 1, they kick the field goal because they know they need to get the ball back anyways. You always, in that situation, in my understanding, and just, my dad was a coach, how I've always understood that situation, you take the points in that situation. I know some people are saying, go for it. Why not go for it? Well, here's the thing. You're in a position where you don't have to put all the game entirely on one play right there. You can kick the field goal, which you're going to need anyways, and then go get your onside kick. The onside kick is going to happen either way. I saw some people saying, they should have gone for it. And I'm like, okay, say they go for it. They still need the onside kick and then the field goal again. And if you're trying to justify it and say, well, it'd have been easier to just go for the touchdown there, that wouldn't be after the onside kick, I think you're grasping at straws there. I don't see it because, again, in time management standards, then you have even less time to get that field goal at the end. Whereas if you kick this field goal now, you have more than enough time if the onside kick is converted. Because, again, either way, you need the onside kick to convert. And you saw at the end of the game, the Steelers defense was trying to give them some time there because they had a timeout left. So you had that situation, and I think that they handled it as best they could. They had a shot at the onside kick, just missed it from getting it, but when it was inbounds. And then the defense, they forced a punt. They just couldn't stop it sooner, and the Steelers tried their lateral thing at the end of the game, and it didn't work. But I still think that was the right decision, because if you go for it, A, if you miss it, it's over. B, and I get it, you're not thinking that you're going to miss it, but even if you get it, you're wasting more time off the clock, and you still need to get that onside kick and then eventually get those stops anyways. And say you get the touchdown, you've run even more time off the clock, you don't get the onside kick, and then it doesn't matter that you have one timeout because they can just run the clock out because you've now wasted the entire clock. So that was just my thoughts on the end of the game scramble there. Trying to figure things out. I don't think that the problems with this team are global. I think that there are individual issues, and this is a good thing, I think, for the long term for the Steelers. There are individual issues that people can shore up. One, I think that the biggest problem on defense with the missed tackles, the not being as physical at the point of attack, I think this team was gassed. And I'm not just saying because they had Thursday Night Football, because, the Browns, they also played on Sunday, but they haven't played nearly as many snaps as the Steelers have on defense. They haven't had to deal with as many 3-and-outs. Their rushing offense is the best rushing offense in the NFL. But I do think that there's a chance that this defense, after some rest, can get back to a normal pace. And if this offense can just be a little more competent, I'm not expecting much with Mitch Trubisky out there. I'm just saying a little bit more. Just not as many 3-and-outs, better than 1-9 on third downs. If they can do that, I think this defense plays a lot better, even while they wait for the return of TJ Watt. But if they don't figure out some way to at least survive against the Jets, it's going to be a really long season. You may be looking at a 1-win record going into the bye week if you're not able to rebound sometime soon. We'll see if they do. It's a long weekend. I want to take some time looking at the All-22 film this weekend so we can do our grades on Monday. If you've been enjoying our grades, we hope you have. I'll have my full grades and readout with that show. We're trying to get one of our interesting guests on that episode, but we'll have some time to do it, of course. So we hope that you've enjoyed the Locked On Steelers podcast. Even if you didn't enjoy the game, Steelers fans, hang in there. This was a tough one, but it's very early in the season, and we've seen this team down from even worse records than this, and find a way to come back, compete, and keep themselves in the fight towards the end, any part of the season. But again, thanks for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Before I get into my final spiel, I want to let you all know about, if you are in the Pittsburgh area, I ask that you come to the Carnegie Science Center tonight, Friday night, in the North Shore of Pittsburgh, right next to Acrisure Stadium where the Steelers play. I believe it's from 6 to 10 is their after hours night. It's $25. You come in, you get drink tickets. They have craft beer there, and you're going to hear us talk a lot about sports. There's going to be sports exhibits, things you can check out, learn about sports, play some games that they have set up for you. And also, I will be there talking along with Josh Yoye of The Athletic, who covers the Penguins for them. I'll be doing presentations, doing some film breakdowns. If you want to meet me, if you want to hang out with me, that's an easy way to go do it. Just get to the North Shore Carnegie Science Center tonight, Friday night, to make sure that you're getting in there. It's a great time. I've been to these things before as a guest, as just a person hanging out, and they're a ton of fun. You drink some great beer. You get to hang out with your friends on a nice night in the North Shore of Pittsburgh. So go check it out. I'll be there, and I hope to see you there. And if just let me know. Hey, Chris, love the Locked On Steelers podcast. I always appreciate it when people hit me up in public. Don't ever be afraid to say hello to me, unless I'm running really fast. If I am, it means I'm moving it, because we got to get to something else, because y'all know I'll be doing all this stuff. Anyway, thanks so much for checking out the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Hang in there, Steelers fans. I know it's rough right now, but we've seen this team turn it around before. It's a long weekend. Let's see if they can correct it against the New York Jets next week. Check out this podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes. We'll be back on Monday, breaking things down for you and your Pittsburgh Steelers with our grades to get you a more serious and long-term analysis, or excuse me, deeper analysis, I guess, on the all 22 film after we've had a chance to look at it all. Thanks again for checking us out. I'll be back on your screens and in your ears very soon.